Hi everyone. Welcome to week 9 of your Introduction to HIPAA course. We're going to be wrapping up the chapters this week with Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is talking about the unique health identifiers and then some of the misconceptions around those identifiers. So we've got basically 5 objectives for this week. We're going to identify some of those unique identifiers. We're going to look at the reasons for those identifiers and where we're at in that process. We're going to look at how do we know where to find the HIPAA law so that we can keep up to date with it as it changes and morphs. We're going to look at some of the problems of medical identity theft and finally wrap up with some of the myths around HIPAA. So basically, just like with everything else we've been discussing when it comes to HIPAA and the claims surrounding, the use of HIPAA, the main reason for any identifier is to simplify the claims. So the idea here is that when we're looking at a claim, we're able to easily identify who the provider is, who the health plan is, who the patient is, and even in some circumstances who the employer is. So the idea is that with this, for example, employer ID, we have a 9-digit code. It's going to be used on all the claims for that particular identifier, and then it's the same number that's used by the IRS. So again, consistency. The whole idea is for everybody to be on the same page. And then we have what's called the healthcare provider ID. Now this one is it's called the NPI. It's a 10-digit number, and it's similar to a DEA number in that it has a check digit. So there's a way to check to make sure that the digits are matching up. So somebody can't just make up digits, in other words. That's kind of the idea behind it. And it's not going to contain any specific identifying information in the number. So, it's not going to have like part of your address or zip code or, anything like that. It's just going to be a generic 10-digit number that's only going to be usable if you know what you're doing with it, basically. And there's 2 types. There's one for individual providers, so doctors and things like that. And then there's also the type for organizations, so clinics, surgery centers, that type of thing would also have an NPI. Then we have our health plan ID. Now, this was started back in like 2007, but by now, you've probably noticed if you have a health plan card, everybody's got a health plan ID on that now. So a lot of times it is the same as the employer ID. So for example, on my card, if I go to it, everybody in my company has the same health plan ID. So we all work for the same place. However, then when it comes to our patient ID, those are different. Those are not going to be the same. Obviously, everybody within the company is going to have their own patient ID. Now, there's some controversy around this. You may have noticed previously on my cards, we used our social security number. So everybody had, their health plan ID as the company, identified the company, and then our patient ID was our social. But they have moved away from that. We're no longer using that as the identifier. And again, it comes back to the whole idea of making sure that we keep things private. So when they talk about the reasons against a patient ID, they want to make sure that it's not able to come back and identify us, specifically. So, in other words, we don't want to be able to have our identification stolen through our medical information. So when you're out there and trying to keep up with all of these things and what's changed and where are we at with that particular change and things like that, they've provided you some different websites that you can go to. The Department of Health and Human Services is always a good one, as well as the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And then we also have some others that include some of the latest rules. So great places to go for information so that you can catch up and see exactly where am I or where is HIPAA in this particular thing. And then, of course, they're going to follow up at the end of this chapter with the whole idea of medical identity theft. Just like with regular identity theft, there's always that risk of your medical identity being stolen. Typically, what it's used for then is to, it's not necessarily going to be stolen by, some Joe Blow off the street. It's going to be used to submit false claims and things like that. So it's a little bit different, but the identity theft is addressed by HIPAA. So as you go through and you read this, if you have any questions, please make sure you let me know, and have a great week.